Hello, welcome to strength number 10. There we go. I finally found a way to alleviate the whole episode number, strength number, blah, blah, blah. Whatever it is, I always get lost, don't I? So, anyways, welcome to episode 10. This one's going to be on curiosity. I am publishing this one before strength number 9, which is judgment, simply because the guests that I want to speak to are available in the opposite order. And I have to say, one thing that I'm struggling with a little bit of vulnerability here is the further down I go in regards to my character strengths, I'm struggling to find A, people who might be able to talk about it, and B, um, just the confidence to be able to talk about it myself alone. And I think that's quite telling about how frequently and how I use the character strengths. Perhaps for my signature strengths, it was easier to find people because they are my signature strengths, and therefore the people I surround myself with also share similar strengths. So I thought that was quite interesting and something to reflect about. Maybe for my personal growth, I need to hang out with people whose character strengths are my lesser used strengths. So I am really excited to be going on this journey from, a character strength 9 onwards, because like I said, they are all proving to be quite challenging, just even me thinking about them in various ways. But today we've got a guest called Zoe Saari, who'll be joining us later on and talking to us about curiosity as a character strength, especially through her work with horses, and more on that in a little while. So, what is curiosity? According to the VIA Character Strength website, it belongs to the virtue of wisdom. Go figure, because curiosity can probably open up doors to new knowledge, which gives you new wisdom. And according to the website, the VIA character strengths, you can increase, or there's two key components to curiosity, and that is to have an interest for new ideas, experiences, and activities, but also a strong desire for building personal knowledge. This is slightly different to love of learning, which was my second character strength, and I believe I mentioned it in episode 2. If you haven't already seen that, check it out there. But curiosity is different to love of learning. Think about it in terms of longevity. I suppose curiosity is about novelty seeking, looking for what's new, and it might be a bit more short term or short lived, while love of learning is sustained. Full vulnerability alert. Now that I've said that out loud, it kind of makes sense as to why there's certain plates that I'm spinning or projects that I've dipped my fingers into, which are really struggling to achieve completion because I'm not putting in the time or the effort. And perhaps I took on those with more of a curiosity element rather than a love of learning element. And what I now need to do is probably tap into more love of learning for those ones that I took on with curiosity, and perhaps exercise a bit more judgment when I am carrying on, or when I am getting curious about certain things, because curiosity shouldn't always mean, especially for me, saying yes to everything and therefore struggling with time, energy, and resources later on. But it should certainly mean, that I'm able to juggle it with judgment or prudence and be able to weigh up what's going to serve me and what's not. But anyways, we digress. So in terms of curiosity and how it's used in my professional and personal life, I have to say it's been a real game changer. Dealing with difficult conversations both at work and in my personal life. Um, Difficult situations meaning those that may cause some kind of tension within teams or groups, even in your personal relationships. It is, I found, a lot more beneficial to handle conversations or conflicting opinions with curiosity. When I approach a conversation, or yeah, when I approach a difficult scenario with potentially the idea of being worried about this is going to lead to confrontation, so I just won't have the conversation, or this is going to be a real, corker because I'm going to lay into this person and I'm going to give them a piece of my mind and really feed them my ego, essentially, is what we're saying. All of those scenarios can be alleviated if we just tap into this with a little bit of curiosity and understanding why a person might be coming across a certain way or what their message and their rationale is. I think in doing so, it's helped me lean into a lot more compassion, but also it's helped me recognize whether or not something is worth using and utilizing my energy for. But we're going to leave it at that very shallow level. Let's hope that this conversation with Zoe that I'm about to have in 10 minutes' time, 7 minutes time, is going to prove to be a little bit more fruitful. We're going to try and get into some nuances and some detailed discussions about work with clients, but also in our personal lives as well. And to be honest, I'm most curious about her work with horses. What can we learn from animals about curiosity? I suppose there's my curiosity. What can we learn from animals that might be able to help us with our personal growth journeys? Let's find out, and I'll catch you on the other side. Peace. So, we'll start off with, in fact, why don't you introduce yourself, actually, Zoe? What do you do? Where are you from? Whatever you feel comfortable telling us.
Okay, cool. So my name is Zoe Saari. I am a positive psychologist, coach, therapist, and equine assisted learning and development practitioner. That's a bit of a mouthful, isn't it? Um, so essentially, I have been a therapist for 20 years and done coaching alongside that. And then obviously we met doing a master's degree in applied positive psychology and coaching psychology.
Mm,
And for my dissertation, I looked at how anything that is inclusive of horses, so basically horse inclusive interventions, there's lots of different names for it. There's lots of slight nuances in the way that horses co-facilitate in when it comes to coaching and therapy and all of that kind of stuff. But I looked at all across the board when horses were involved, what the outcomes showed and whether or not they fit into the PERMA model. So for those that don't know, the PERMA model is positive emotions, engagement, relationships, meaning or mattering, and achievement. So when I did the dissertation, horses have been my passion my whole life. I should probably mention that.
mm.
I was born with horses, the passion for horses running through my veins. The first time I sat in a saddle actually was on the Champs-Élysées. My dad worked in France and we were in Paris, and I was 2 years old, and my mum said that I sat in the saddle like I'd been riding before I could walk.
Wow.
So that's, I mean, that's how passionate I am about horses. They're just in my blood. So so it was a really good excuse for me to kind of bring my passion for horses and my passion for helping people together, and to actually do some solid research on those things and how those two things come together. And um, on the back of that, I am now in a position where I have about 8 acres of land. I've got my horses in my backyard. I'm extremely lucky, and blessed to be in the position that I'm in. And so I just thought, well, let's introduce the two things together and let's start doing that as part of my professional practice. Um, and so in September last year, I started a not-for-profit called Humanship UK, and we're very new. Obviously, we only launched in September last year, so we're still very new. We're still finding our feet and sort of working out how the how the packages are going to look and how we're going to practice this. But we've had a few clients through the door, and the feedback has been really good so far. And we want to do some retreats and some other bits and pieces as well. But basically, I'm just really passionate about what I do.
And we can hear that. Like, it's what an introduction to an episode on curiosity, because I've got so much curiosity now about this, as I'm sure the listeners have as well. So I'm going to try to do all of our questions justice and understand a little bit more about humanship and your work with horses. So let's crack on with character strengths first of all. When did you first come across character strengths? How have you used it? And yeah, tell us your journey with character strengths as a whole.
So my journey with character strength started with the MAP CP,
Mm,
the degree that we did. I think I had never really heard about character strengths before, and so I was really um, sort of taken by it, taken by the theory of it, and taken by what it meant to people and what it meant for my practice and what it meant for me personally. And just became really interested in sort of developing my understanding really of character strengths, from that sort of initial introduction. Um, Prior to that, I hadn't really heard anything about character strengths. Interestingly, given that I've been a therapist for 20 years, it wasn't something that I'd come across.
mm,
It wasn't even something that I came across in my undergrad psychology degree. So that was interesting to me because my two degrees were 10 years apart. So that might be why, because obviously positive psychology is, and the research in positive psychology, although it's been going on for quite a long time, it's really sort of building now.
mm,
Um, so yeah, I was really interested in that, and then introducing my clients to character strengths. And I love the different ways that character strengths can fit into the different types of practice that I do. So it can fit in with the therapy side of things, it can fit in with the coaching side of things,
mm.
and it can fit into every area of life. So it doesn't matter what the client is talking about in regards to whether they're coming to see me because they want help being more focused in their career or their business, or whether it's sort of more on the more professional side, or whether it's more on the personal side. So whether it's life, money, relationships, that kind of thing, it can be useful across the board. So yeah, I mean, really for me, that's the key, is that it's so adaptable to every area of life, and that you can use the character strengths to help you improve how you're feeling about yourself more than
Mm.
anything else.
I love that you said that. It's so holistic in its
Mm.
use and origins and everything about it. And I suppose one of the reasons why, so my undergrad was a joint psychology and sociology degree, also
Okay.
10 years before we did the MAP CP. And I think probably just because I suppose most of psychology is still very deficit based and still very medical model based.
Yeah.
I've had a friend on who's a doctor for the NHS, and a lot of what they talk about in terms of their training and stuff, it's still very, very deficit model. Here's what's wrong. And obviously, the positive psychology teaches us to flip that on its head and say that's important, but
Yeah.
now let's look at what's strong rather
Yeah.
than what's wrong all the time, which is one of the reasons why I love character strengths as well. So with curiosity, where does that fall for you in your profile latest one, if you remember it at all? And if you don't remember it, what does curiosity mean for you?
I think curiosity is about number 3 for me.
Oh, signature one.
It's one of my characters. It's one of my signature strengths. Yeah.
Nice.
I come from a family of really nosy people.
Love that.
I think we're all really curious. There's 6 children in my family, so I'm one of 6.
Yeah.
And I think we're all just really curious people. We're always asking questions. And I think that's been a case for me throughout my whole life.
Mm,
Certainly my mum always encouraged questions, always encouraged us to question everything, never take anything as read, always question everything. So curiosity, I think, is sort of ingrained in who I am and what I've become. And I think it's one of the reasons why I became a therapist. I had therapy myself when I was 25 years old. I had hypnotherapy and then went on to train as a hypnotherapist
mm,
because I was curious. My therapist said to me that he was putting together a training course and thought I'd be a good candidate, but he didn't train me. And he said that he wouldn't train me for a year after my own therapy because there was crossover and transference and all of that kind of
mm.
stuff. So for me, curiosity is kind of ingrained in who I am and what I do. And certainly I think for clients, curiosity is a really important strength, because being curious about who you are, what you are, why you are, is all part of the learning and the understanding, and just asking the questions, asking those questions of yourself, as well as the coach or therapist asking those questions of you.
Mm. I think this gives me a nice little segue into just coming to the crunch question. What can horses teach us about curiosity?
Oh, well, that's a good one, because horses are very curious animals,
Right.
extremely curious animals, and but they're cautiously curious. So when you introduce a horse to something that they've not seen before, not seen in a while, or something that they're a little bit unsure of, they might balk in the beginning. They might sort of turn away or try and get away from it in the beginning. But if you give them enough time, often, more often than not, especially when they're younger, they will approach the thing that they were originally afraid of and get really curious about it. They'll want to put their nose on it. They'll want to sniff it. They'll want to maybe paw at it. Um, they're just innately curious animals. And so they teach us a lot about even the things that we're afraid of, to get curious,
Mm.
because quite often it's the things that they're afraid of that they get the most curious about.
See, I feel like this might even open up a little therapy slash coaching session for me because I'm thinking now, I like that, and I've used it myself with clients as well in terms of the thing that I mean, we often say sit with the discomfort.
What is
Yep.
the thing that you're worried about or uncomfortable about? Sit with it, go through this dark forest, whatever analogies it is that we've used.
Yep.
And now I'm putting myself in the coachee slash client seat. I'm thinking, oh, that is kind of scary to sit with that discomfort. I know it's crucial and I know it's helpful. I've done it, been there, got the t-shirt, and I will repeatedly do that.
Absolutely.
But it's still really, really scary. So when you say get curious about what scares me, how might you kind of illustrate that in a coaching session? Let's say, for example, with horses or a therapy session.
So I think this idea of sitting with discomfort is important. Um, a lot of the time, emotions are named as positive or negative, right?
Mm,
So, sadness is a negative emotion, happiness is a positive emotion. But I think what's really important about that is if you remove those labels, what emotions become is information. They become information about where you are, what you're experiencing in that moment. And if you can get curious about that, if you can really get curious about what is this emotion telling me? So it might be something from the past that has triggered you. It might be something in the moment that has just made you feel uncomfortable for whatever reason that might be. Certainly with the horses, sometimes right at the very beginning of the session, because the horses are big, even the little one is quite big and, strong. They're strong. Um, People are a little bit reluctant and a little bit hesitant because they fear the animal because the animal is bigger and stronger than they are.
mm,
And so there's discomfort there right at the very beginning, and then working through that discomfort, kind of saying, okay, well, that's fine. We go at whatever pace is comfortable for you. And I think that's important as well, is making sure that you're not pushing yourself too hard, but you're also not pulling back from it. So you're kind of sitting just on the edge of that comfort zone. And when you feel completely ready, that's the time to step forward just slightly outside it, rather than kind of going, well, I've got to get out of my comfort zone, so I just need to. So with
mm,
horses, there was a thing with horse training, and actually some people still do it, called flooding. So, and I know this happens in therapy as well.
mm,
So for example, if someone has an arachnophobia, their fear of spiders, sometimes some therapists will bring a spider into the room and completely flood that person emotionally in order for them to overcome the thing that they're afraid of. And with horses, it's the same. If a horse was afraid of a plastic bag, you kind of wave the plastic bag at them until they stop moving and then take the plastic bag away, so that they kind of associated stopping with moving the plastic bag away. The concern about that is with horses, quite often the tension in their body is still there, and with people too.
wow.
The tension in the body is still there. So even though they've stopped and you're removing the thing that they're afraid of, they may not necessarily relax. They may not actually bring their adrenaline down. They may not actually be able to self-regulate. So I think it's important to understand that when you're moving forward, you have to do it in a place where you are relaxed enough to feel comfortable with that, rather than flooding yourself in a situation and making yourself even more uncomfortable. The two things both work to an extent. However, certainly for me, I find it works if you can help that person to self-regulate and to be able to breathe through that discomfort before they take that next step forward.
Mm. This is so eye-opening. So I teach trainee teachers, especially in psychology, and one of the specifications for A-level psychology talks a lot about cognitive behavioral therapy, classical and operant conditioning, and all that's telling me is, and I knew I had, again, disclaimer to anyone who's listening, I'm not totally against CBT. I just have contentions as to why they may not work all the time, and this is probably a good reason as to why.
Yep.
What I'm hearing from what you told me is that with things like CBT or flooding, all you're essentially doing is it's just conditioning a person rather than teaching them the skills to be independent in how to regulate those emotions, because that, those, it might not be the plastic bag that comes up later on. It might be plastic wrapping of something else, which is not quite the same thing, but then that
Yep.
can also still cause confusion and bring up whatever's stored in the body. And it
Yep.
sounds like I liked what you said about delabeling the emotion so it becomes information. If we don't process the information, you're skipping ahead a step, and then that's just kind of left in some galaxy somewhere floating around, and it will come back and haunt later on, which I'm not a big fan of. I don't like haunters.
Absolutely.
I
I
like to work
totally
through
agree.
things. So it's
Yeah.
really quite eye-opening hearing it in that way, that actually the horses can really slow us down in a good
Mhm.
way. Like you have to pause and really process what's happening and going, and you've got what you're going through.
Yes. Yeah. And
Wow.
certainly because horses will give you immediate feedback. So horses are really very, very good at being right here, right now. And they're not judgmental. They can't judge you. They don't have the capacity to make judgments. They don't have the capacity to have an agenda. So when you're in the presence of a horse, they are just being a horse. It's the thing that they're good at, right? They're really good at being horses.
Mm.
So what's nice about that is if you step forward too fast, or if you take, if your energy is not in the right place, then that horse will feed back to you. So they'll either move away from you, or they won't move at all, or they'll do something that will feed back to you immediately in the moment to tell you that they're uncomfortable. They're uncomfortable with the energy that you're bringing. And that's key, I think. And I think that's for any therapist or any coach, I think it's important that we have that energetic connection with our clients, that we can feel that energy in the room, that we have that connection in order to be able to say, oh, let's just pause here for a second. How are you feeling within yourself? What is your body telling you? What are the emotions that are coming up for you right now? And just be in that moment with that client like the horses do, so that you can really kind of hone in and get curious, really coming back to that curiosity. Get curious about what's going on for you in this present moment right now, right here, and what's that
Mm.
telling you.
Wow. This is really profound because I would never have thought in a million years about using animals in such a way. And perhaps it's not all animals. What is it that makes horses so different or special from other animals, perhaps in using it in this circumstance? Removing your bias because of your love of it.
Yeah. Right. So for me, the thing about horses, and I just want to reiterate that we're not using horses.
Mm,
So horses are co-facilitators. They're,
yeah.
they are co-facilitating in this environment. So the language around, and actually a lot of people say using horses, and we use horses as therapists, and we use horses for coaching. And actually for me, that's not what I'm doing. I'm not using my horses. My horses co-facilitate alongside me. They are equals to me in this regard. The only
Wow.
difference between them and me is that I have language and they don't. And actually the fact that they don't have language is partially what makes them really special. The
Mm,
other thing that makes them really special, apart from the fact that I said earlier that they're not judgmental and they've got no agenda, is that they're flight animals. So they're herd animals and they're flight animals, which means that they rely on each other energetically to stay safe, to
right.
stay safe. So you're in this situation where you've got a herd of horses and there's a threat somewhere, and one horse will lift their head, and then another horse will lift their head, and then they'll all lift their heads. And then the horse that happens to be the lead horse in that particular group on that day, because it can change, there's no sort of specific lead mare or what have you. It can change, different environments, different leaders, etc. What happens is one of those horses will make a decision to either put their head back down to carry on eating, in which case all of the others will do the same, or they'll all move. And when they move in sync with each other. So when you see horses trotting across a field, quite often you'll see their footfall is exactly the same. When you see horses moving, they'll move like birds do in the sky. They'll move around. A really good example of that is if you look at the Jurassic Park, you know, the Jurassic Park movies, when you see
Yeah.
those herds of dinosaurs moving and they're all moving in sync with each other, and horses do exactly the same thing. They don't speak to each other. They just know what distance to stay away from each other in order to stay safe and to move together in a particular way. And all of
Wow.
that is through energetic communication. And so what they bring is this ability to read our body language, to read our energy. They can hear a heartbeat from quite a distance away. So they can hear our heartbeat. And there is research that actually shows that when you're riding a horse, your heartbeat and their heartbeat can actually sync.
Wow.
So for all of those reasons, I think they're really special in this work. And just that ability to understand our energy and what we're bringing. And the heartbeat thing is really funny to me. I did a course once on Join Up, which is a Monty Roberts thing. So anyone who doesn't know who Monty Roberts is, Monty Roberts was the guy who came over in the 80s and worked with the Queen's horses and did something called Join Up, which is he's become really famous for. And I actually went and did a course on Join Up with a lady called Kelly Marks, who is his UK trainer. And I took my own horse, and a couple of other people did join up with my horse as well. But I did this thing where you kind of send the horse away and then you stop and the horse comes to you. My heart was beating so fast in my chest because I'd been running around. My horse stayed on the periphery. He just stayed out there. He wasn't coming anywhere near me. He could hear my heart pounding in my chest. So the lady who was instructing me came up to the fence and started talking to me and asking me questions. You know, how are you feeling? Everything, he's fine. He's just standing there looking at you. And the minute I started talking, my heartbeat started to come down. My horse moved up to my shoulder and stood right next to me.
Mm.
And that experience really sort of brought it home to me how connected they are with us without us even knowing how connected they are.
I think there's something really beautiful there. Two things. The first thing is thank you for clarifying that horses are not a prop or a resource, that they are co-facilitators, and to be mindful about our language about that, which is really crucial. So you learn something new from all of that curiosity there. Thank you for that. And the second thing is I think everything that you're telling me about energy syncing and the ability to read body language, it's almost like one of the first things we learned about coaching itself, which was there is strength in silence.
Yes.
And there is so much to be read from body language, eye movements, heart rates, physiological. I mean, myself, I started therapy when I started the coaching course, and a lot of the stuff that my therapist did with me was somatic and was very much about sitting with discomfort in the body. Where do I feel that in the body? And I'm still yet to read Basil van der Kolk's book on The Body Keeps the Score, but
Yeah,
Gabor
I haven't
Mate's
read
work,
that yet either.
all
It's
of
on
that
my
stuff
list.
about how trauma is stored in the body. And what I'm hearing is this, and it's funny that you say about the whole syncing of things. It's weird. Like whenever I'm holding a newborn baby, um, and they're just very very silent and very peaceful, I always listen into their heartbeats, or I always try to sync breathe. I don't know why. It's just this innate thing that I try to do when they're napping in my arms or whatever. Just
Yeah.
trying to sync the breath at least, and it just brings a sense of calm and connection above everything.
Yeah.
And it's just beautiful that with horses as well, there is that element of energy syncing, energy connecting, and that strength in silence is just beautiful.
Yeah. So one of the things that I have done with clients in the past with the horses is actually have them stand and put their hand on the horse's belly and breathe with the horse. So it's really interesting that you said about the syncing of breathing. I did it in a group situation not that long ago where I had a group of people came for a horsemanship sort of weekend, and I was part of that along with a horse trainer and another friend of mine who's a yoga teacher and a sound bath healer. And we did this whole weekend with this group of people, and they came into the arena and they were all sort of high energy, and the horses were a bit high energy, and then I stopped them all in a sort of circle around us and asked them all just to breathe in sync with their horses and just to watch the rise and fall of their horses' bellies, to breathe with the horse. And the whole atmosphere in the arena changed. And I said to them, have you noticed anything different about how it feels in here now? And they were like, yeah, it's right. It feels really calm and really quiet. And it was just a completely different vibe after we'd all sort of synced breathing with the horses. And so that's part of it, I think. And coming back to curiosity, I think being curious about people and being curious about stories. I think one of the things that I really love about what I do is I love people's stories. I love to hear people's stories. And so getting curious about your story and about what that means for you and about being sort of part of a bigger picture as well. I think that's part of it, you know, coming back to yourself, but then also that connection, you know, the idea about being connected to everything, being connected to each other, being connected to nature. That's I'm always curious about that.
So on that note, then, like, you and I love stories. You and I love, humans and horses, and you're literally the company is called Humanship, right? Yes, Humanship
Yes.
UK. So why is it, do you think, that some people are not curious enough?
Um,
I share that with a bit of, I'll share a bit of context with that.
yeah,
I
that's a really
find,
interesting question.
I think one of the reasons I've had a bit of a gripe, if you like, for want of a better word, recently about people who, with things happening around the world, in particular in Gaza and Palestine, where
Yep.
people don't want to know because they
Mm,
have this very comfortable lives of privilege, and they hold very strong values of another world, another time, another place,
mm.
forgetting that just because you've won postcode lottery doesn't absolve you of the right to try and make the world better for everyone else, or
Yeah.
at least some other people. And for them, their excuse is, well, as long as I make it better for the people in my echo chamber, then that's fine. And I find that a little bit odd that they don't want to go out and learn or be curious.
Yeah, that's interesting, isn't it? I think so. For me, I think it's really a case of people being comfortable. So we were talking about being discomfort, you know, the discomfort thing earlier, and sitting with that discomfort and then stepping out of our comfort zone and moving forward and growing and developing in that way.
Mm,
I think some people just aren't prepared to do that. And I think that that's their prerogative. I think as humans, we have a choice. We always have a choice. Whether we like the choices of others or not, it's still their choice whether or not they choose to step outside of that comfort zone, move out of that serious denial that these things are going on, and actually put themselves out there in a way that is going to make a difference.
mm,
I also think that we influence, by influencing our own circle in a positive way, we are having a ripple effect beyond that. So when you're talking to one person, you're not just talking to that one person, you're talking to the people that they know and the people that they know and the people that
mm,
they know, and so on and so forth. So if we can have a positive influence, if you like, for want of a better word, on one person's life, because they've chosen to come and work with us personally, then we are actually having a ripple effect into the other areas of their life.
mm,
So an example of that is, you know, a couple of clients I've had over the years. I mean, there's lots actually, but there's two specifically that come to mind. One is a lady who, when I first qualified as a therapist, came to see me because she wanted to enhance her sport. She'd been an archer for about, I think at this point, about 25 years, maybe longer. As it turned out, what she really needed help was her relationship,
mm,
because her relationship was, she was struggling in her relationship with her husband, and her husband was quite obsessive. So, you know, cans had to be the right way around in the cupboards, everything had to be in its place, and he was quite obsessive about that. So if things weren't in their place, he used to tell her off and have a go at her, and her reaction to that was quite often to be upset and to be you know, feel unworthy, and you know, her self-belief was low and all of that kind of stuff. So one of the things she chose to change was her reaction to him when he did this. And so she took herself off, and she cried and expressed the emotion that she needed to express, but not where he could see her or hear her doing that. And then his behavior started to change. He started to offer to do things that he'd never offered to do before, and their relationship got better. And I asked her why she thought that was, and she said, because he doesn't think I care enough anymore, because he doesn't see me crying and getting upset. I just smile and nod and walk away. And that's a really good example of how we can change our own behavior in order to influence the behavior of others. So it's about leading by example. It's about saying, this is what I'm doing. You can join me if you choose to, but then not having a judgment about what people choose. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I hear what you're saying. And I think there's been many a times I've tried to lean into some of that positive psychology, especially, and invite people rather than shame people.
Yeah.
And that can be quite hard for
It's
many,
challenging.
for many as well. Yeah, especially to uphold. I think it can be quite easy once you've kind of established, actually, yeah, this feels good as well for me to do, and this feels more welcoming, etc. And there will always be room for that. I think there comes a point after a while when it's like, when you're up against systems, I'll be honest, it's real systems of oppression essentially, that you can sometimes feel a little bit like, what is going on? How are we 7 months into this horrendous atrocity that's occurring and none of this welcoming and inviting is happening? Do we now need to turn to shaming and blaming? And not that that's ever gone away. It's kind of almost been there, but pockets of it, to be honest. So yeah, it's a difficult one, but certainly I do resonate with what you're saying about if you want to change the behavior of a people, let's say, start with yourself and be the change that you want to see, as we often hear.
Yeah. And I think also there is there is a point where things are going too far for too long, and it becomes almost personal for us. I know that there's been periods in my life where I felt like that about certain things that are going on around me, and I felt almost helpless because I know that my influence will only go so far. And I think that helplessness is part of how we experience those things, because we can make some difference, but we can't make all the difference, because like you just very clearly pointed out, really it's the systems that are broken. And the people within those systems quite often that are broken, hence why they're in those systems in the first place. And we know that as psychologists, we know that we are driven, and most people are driven by underlying psychological drivers, which push us into certain careers, certain paths, certain ways of being. Not everybody gets curious about that. Not everybody gets curious about who they are and why they are. And not everyone gets curious about what they can change and how they can change it.
This made me so one of my initial thoughts to that was going to say, I was going to jokingly say, and this is why everyone needs therapy, and everyone needs therapy with horses. But I have a gripe with that, because I think when I hear people say everyone should go to therapy, I think, yes, but not everyone's ready for therapy. I think there's an element of yourself that you have to bring that desires change.
Absolutely.
And like the people we've just spoken about, there's only so much, the phrases it says you can bring a horse to water, but you can't force it to drink.
Absolutely.
And in the same breath, I don't want to bring horses into that either and say that, everyone needs therapy with horses, because that is also a little bit of it kind of like an insult, in that it's not available for everyone as and when you can just pluck it off a tree. You have to really want and value it as well in order to get the best effects out of it.
Absolutely.
And on that, actually, I did want to ask as well about horses. So growing up in Malden, where I do, you know the area well, hence why I can reference it. I probably came across horses the first time when I was about 10 or 11, because a couple of people in my form class had horses themselves, and I'd go down to the stables with them after school and just stand back and watch, essentially. And it was really quite beautiful to see. And over time, I realized that having a horse is a very expensive business, very expensive thing to do and have. So I recognized that there was definitely a class disparity there. Now, how accessible is it now? I mean, we're talking 20 years on since my experience of horses back then. How accessible are horses for coaching now, and what do we do to make that accessibility better?
Yeah, so that was one of the reasons why I started a not-for-profit, because I recognize that there's a lot of people that wouldn't ordinarily be able to afford this type of intervention. And it's expensive. It is expensive. It costs around £5,000 per horse per year. So if you equate that to having a herd of horses, that's a lot of money each year. So, and prices in this area, as well as every other area, has gone up. And actually, if you put equestrian or equine in front of anything, it goes up by about 20%.
Wow.
Because people know we're suckers for our animals, right? So, yeah, that's fully taken advantage of. So I think what's really interesting about that is that I don't think it is. It's a really interesting point, because I don't think it is as accessible. I think it is still very much a case of, unless you know someone with horses who can, you can go and ride. So when I was younger, I didn't really know anyone else with horses. And so my parents were in a privileged position to be able to pay for me to go and have riding lessons. And then off the back of that, I used to go to the stables for the whole weekend. I used to go all day Saturday and all day Sunday. And I used to help out at the stables, mucking out, looking after the horses, grooming, leading the riding for the disabled people and other children and things on the ponies. So then off the back of that, I was able to spend more time learning about the horses and everything else. I never got any free riding lessons. My parents still had to pay for the riding lessons, even though I was there all day Saturday and all day Sunday. But it gave me a really good grounding in management, horse management, and looking after them, and feeding, etc., etc. And I think those opportunities are still available for people. However, riding lessons are expensive. And looking after horses is expensive. And I think one of the reasons why I started a not-for-profit rather than just an ordinary limited company was so that I can get funding in order to be able to offer free places, or at least subsidized places, for people who can't afford to pay however much it is to come and have a full session with the horses with me. And also to be able to offer the coaching and therapy at a subsidized rate to certain individuals as well, who really need it but can't access it. Because as we know, unfortunately, our NHS is in a serious state of low funding and low manning. They don't have enough manpower. And I think, the CBT thing, I'm with you 100%. I think it works really well for people while they're doing it. I've had a lot of clients walk through my door over the years and gone, I had CBT, but
Exactly. And it's like, why are you back here then?
yeah, exactly, right. So I think it's useful. I wouldn't say that any therapy isn't useful. I think they're all useful, but the fact that it is really generally the only thing that is available, apart from full-blown psychiatry through our NHS, is a bit sad. There's so many of us practitioners out there with experience, with education, that they're not utilizing who they should be utilizing. Anyway, I'm going to get off my soapbox now. That's a whole different conversation. So my idea about the not-for-profit, and like I say, we're really new, so we're still building on the foundation of what we want to produce and how we want to bring people into that. But the idea of it is to get funding so that we can say to people, especially cohorts such as single parents. I was a single parent for a very long time, so I know what that challenge looks like. Veterans, people who have served the country and really don't get a lot back for that. People who are in the services, all kinds of different cohorts that really need support. I wouldn't say help, so they need support but aren't getting it. And that was my reason for starting the not-for-profit, was so that we can actually provide some support for those people. And it may be enough, it may not be enough, but at least it's something.
Yeah.
And we also know, obviously, there's a lot of research out there that talks about green spaces, green and blue spaces, and how great that is. Just being outside, being in nature, being with animals can help with people's well-being. And so the idea that we can bring people and just actually even just come and groom a pony, just spend some time just being with the pony and grooming them in a lovely environment outdoors, sometimes is enough just to give them some relief from the challenges that they're experiencing in their life.
What better? I can't think of a better way to be present in a moment, because like just hearing the image of, being outdoors, grooming, like for someone who's never picked up a brush to groom a horse before, I would definitely be there in that moment, making
Yeah.
sure, am I doing it right? Is the horse comfortable? Do I know how to do, like, there's what better ways to get rid of all the stresses of life and actually just be there in that moment? And I can just imagine grooming a horse or a pony and seeing like the stomach inflate, deflate, inflate, deflate, and just getting lost in that moment. There's something very therapeutic about that. So yes, I think we'll come to an end here. And actually, I wanted to ask you, so if anyone wanted to reach out and find out more about humanship, how would they get in contact with you?
So probably the best way to contact me is via email. So they can email me at connect. So connection is something we've talked about a lot. So connect@humanshipuk.org.
Mhm.
And I'm also on all of the platforms. So I'm on LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, you name it, I'm on it.
Wonderful. I'll put all of that in the description box so people can just click their way through and find what it is that they need to find. But I think I certainly look forward to more horse content and engaging with those as well, because it's just an element that I see pop up on my TikTok every now and then fades away. So it would be nice to see some more of that content. Actually, I will definitely reach out and find that follow. Is there anything else that you'd like to share before we wrap up about curiosity at all?
Only that I would invite everyone to just be curious about who you are, be curious about what you are, why you are, be curious about your relationships, be curious about other people. Um, just get curious about life generally, and you'll learn so much about what's going on with you and how you're interacting and all of those things. I think curiosity is a great strength. Um, and be curious about people's stories as well. I think that's really important. We're so judgmental.
Which is interestingly the next episode, Judgment. So
Right,
it'll
there
be
you
nice to
go.
see.
It's a nice
Um,
segue into your next.
yeah, absolutely
Yeah,
curious as to why those two were grouped together. Well, it'll be interesting to find out.
yeah.
Thank you so much, Zoe, for giving us your time and for teaching us lots about horses and coaching, and about what you do. And I'll look forward to catching up with you on one of those socials, as well as will the followers.
Thanks, Afsar. Really enjoyed it. Thanks for inviting me.
That was so insightful. Oh my gosh, I never actually thought. I think my biggest takeaway from that is that there is strength in silence. And while I already know that, go figure, muted healing, it's about muting the noises that take you away from who you are. Sometimes I forget that actually it's your own voice that can be the one that's quite um, overpowering, and it's that voice that sometimes needs to be reduced, and perhaps I'm using a lot of judgment with that voice, which I'm curious to see as to what my next guest in the next episode will say about that, because curiosity and judgment were put in together. And that was interesting that Zoe's final words were, maybe sometimes it's important to park the judgment. So let's find out what that is. I think my challenge, as with every episode I try to do, is set myself a little challenge moving forward. It's going to be to exercise curiosity more than I already do. I'm going to try to exercise it alongside prudence. So, curiosity, if it's about interest in the short term, yes, all the way. If it's about interest in the long term, I really have to exercise prudence to recognize, is this something that I'm going to be able to sustain with my love of learning? If yes, go for it. If no, probably not, because my plates are spinning on so many levels as it is that I just possibly probably can't take on too much more. So, definitely curiosity. But at least on a day to day level, on a daily level, I need to start asking myself and others, I suppose, internally as well, why, what would happen if, how about, what could an alternative be, and just treat things with a little bit more curiosity that is gentle, rather than trying to, catch somebody out, for example. I think that's important, especially with the current situation I have going on with regards to a potential opportunity for an immersive theatre experience. I think it would be a good idea for me to exercise curiosity in a gentle way and recognize, I wonder what this could open up or what this could bring for me, in the future. So, with that said, we're going to wrap up this episode on curiosity, and I'll meet you next time when it comes to judgment. As always, thank you everyone for the love and the support. Please do share this with a friend, and don't forget to check out Zoe's socials in the description box below. Take care.